This video is a short tutorial for my students in a research methods class. Specifically, it will address what I call the feasibility of a research question, whether that question allows you to complete the project in the time frame of our module, which is no more than 3 months. So I structured this conversation on a set of slides that I'd like to share with you to make my points clear. Specifically, in the seminars we just had, some of the students had a chance to understand the recipe for these research questions. There are two big recipes here illustrated with the above two text box and the second method, the second recipe with the text box at the bottom. Basically, to make sure you have a feasible research question, you should make sure that there are no more than two concepts in your research question. To meet the criteria for that research question to fit the topic of the module, which this year is management and the public administration and defense and security domains. So a research question at the intersections of these two fields, management on one side and public admin, defense and security on the other side. Yeah, so to meet that, you could do only of these two things to meet the criteria. One, and by the way, parenthesis here, the topic changes every year. So instead of public administration, defense, and security, in a different year could be the natural environment or creativity, innovation, or other topics that we could think of. Every year we change this topic at the intersection of which we place this project. So to make sure you fit at the intersection, one of the concepts needs to be a management concept, the other, a concept that is central or at least very commonly used in that domain. To give you an example from the bibliography this year, there was a recent research article published on the role of conflict, specifically the street protests and entrepreneurship. But entrepreneurship is obviously a management concept. Street protest is a PADS concept, but more on that soon. What I'd like to focus on are these two recipes. At the bottom, the other recipe is to have two management concepts in your research question, but address it with data from the PADS domain. Or if the topic next year would be creativity and innovation, with data about creative firms or creatives to ensure you fit within the topic of that brief. Now, we connect these concepts in a research question with specific words for specific verbs. I'm keen, and I'd like to encourage students to use words that are a bit more flexible, like relates to, associated with this concept. So something in a managerial concept relates to this public administration concepts rather than directive verbs like it drives and it influences, it explains, which is the direction from left to right, or words like driven, influence, explained by, which gives a sense of direction from right to left. Why do I encourage more flexible terms? Because within the timeline of our module, I won't be able to cover practical ways on how to run experiments. Only experiments can actually get to causality, and only with experiments we should be more comfortable using directive verbs like the last two sets listed here. With cross-sectional data, which tends to be the kind of data students generally are able to obtain within such short time frame, well, cross-sectional data cannot help us really get to causality. So it's better to use words like relates to, associates with. I'll give you some examples of such words. And after this, I'll look at some research questions that were attempted by students recently in my module. I finished last lecture in this module showing how a recent paper in a very important journal, I think Organizational Science, relates something that is managerial to something that is in the public authority, defense, security sort of domain. Specifically, they related entrepreneurship to street protests. Specifically, entrepreneurship, it's a broad term here, but in a research question, I actually encourage you to be a bit more narrow, not use entrepreneurship, but use a metric or something I guess closer to a clear aspect of entrepreneurship, such as the founding of new ventures. So this paper connected the founding of new ventures to street protests, which deal with city administration and therefore fits within the topic of public administration, defense, and security. Another example, the other recipe and how it can be implemented could be with two management concepts, management concept one and management concept two, as at the bottom of this video. But then specifying that you're doing this in the concept of something, some data that fits within the domain of PADS, of public administration, defense, and security, or if the topic would be something else, not PADS, data from that relates to natural environment or data that relates to creative industries, creatives, could be other domains that this class will intersect with management. Another example here, human capital development relates to, is associated with investment in strategic capabilities, let's say in the context of social work. And I'd like to actually look a bit closer at this question and give you tips for such a question. Human capital development could be easily a survey sent to public servants, at least 30, as you know, it's a requirement for decent quant data, at least 30 public servants answering questions that scales that already have been probably used in current research about the extent that their perceptions about being exposed to development opportunities in their job or investments that are being done for their development professionally. On the other side, there are perceptions about broader issues in their organizations, like the strategic capability and how they are addressed by their organization. Speaking of investment in strategic capabilities, if you look at this question and you take it at the firm level, and we use Orbis data, which is a source that we frequently use in my module. Orbis data is firm financial data that is collected across time and across the world. There's a metric for this, specifically research and development investments of firms. And it's assumed it's a proxy for these firms' investments in strategic capabilities. Social work. It's actually, I looked it up, and Orbis has an industry stated there for social work. So you could actually look at firms functioning in social work industry firms, their investments in R&D, and then find a way to proxy human capital development. I'm not sure Orbis has this kind of organizational data. You can look around and see if something can be a proxy of it. If not, consider other management concepts instead of human capital and development. So another management concept one. I'll take a look now at some research questions that I remember, and I adapted actually some of them from recent conversations with my students. There were many very thought-provoking research questions, and I'm sorry I decided to stop and analyze just these three to see an exercise that I mentally do when I look at the research question as an instructor in this class. So I look at the research question, and these are my filters for understanding the feasibility of that question, how easy it would be for the students to tackle that question within the time frame of our module. And let's look at the first question. To what extent does leadership styles relate to employee autonomy in public administration? I highlighted in green the key concepts in this research question. Specifically, the first one, leadership style, is the management concept one. Employee autonomy is the management concept two. And in public administration, it's assumed that the data will come from the public administration firms, possibly observed in Orbis. However, I see some issues with this question. I'd like you to see what, I mean, there's a merit. In all questions, there are merits, but we need to pay attention to what could be the bottlenecks, the elements that will prevent progress on a timely fashion on getting data, analyzing it. So I put my notes on the right-hand side for this question. In terms of getting quantitative data from Orbis, this question is not suitable because in Orbis, we don't find metrics that are organizational about people. Orbis reports a lot of financials. Some financials may be proxies for people-related issues, but they're imperfect. I mean, that's still acceptable as long as you have an argument that it's a good proxy. But I don't think there, in my experience with Orbis, I didn't find a proxy for leadership styles. I'm pretty sure it doesn't exist, or employee autonomy. Therefore, Orbis is probably not an option for this question. A survey is more likely. However, it requires 30 more, 30 or plus respondents that are public administrators. So where would you get 30 public administrators would be the key question for that team handling this research question. Indeed, in their survey, they can plug in a scale for assessing autonomy from the employee perceptions and also a scale for that employee's perception, public servant perceptions of their direct manager. If they perceive that direct manager as a leader, because there is a difference in management between managers and leaders. Yeah, so careful with that. You probably have to have a control question in there. Do you perceive your direct manager as a leader? Discard the data where respondents say, no, I don't perceive him as a leader, and just keep the data where they perceive them as a leader. Just a suggestion. It's up to the team on how they design this. In terms of qual, there are several options here. You can have interviews with public servants, but you need at least 3 professionals in this domain. You can have focus groups. Focus groups, of course, if you can get to more than 3 professionals, because you'll need at least 3 participants in a focus group, and 2 focus groups for your data. Let's take a look now at the second research question. What is the relationship between wartime conflicts and business innovation, and how does government leadership influence this dynamic? Now, let's look at the words highlighted in green. It's 3 words, 3 concepts in a research question that from the start, I recommend to have just 2 concepts. This is a bit too much for a research question, so it's not feasible. One of these needs to go if you want to make sure you can complete the project on time. Specifically, so in addition to the too many concepts, I see a possibility for these research questions to be addressed with Orbis data, but you won't be able to get in Orbis government leadership proxies. Orbis doesn't have government leadership proxies because Orbis is at the firm level. And of course, some of you would think, how about we aggregate at the country level? And then that we don't generally do country level analysis in management. We care about firms, we care about people. Aggregating and analysis at the country level tends to be the realm of other degrees, public administration, geography. So it's weird to have a country level analysis. So Orbis is possible, but remove government leadership. The other recommendation could be, wartime conflict is possible if you use Orbis, because you can create a variable as binary variable and observe firms in a pre-war setting, pre-war time. So select the country, UK. Actually, UK didn't have any. Yeah, you can say UK is still affected by current wartime conflicts in Europe. And look UK before and UK now during the wartime conflict, but you choose maybe a country that is more exposed to this phenomena of wartime conflict, and then look at the firms in a year before and in a year after, or in the year after the war was declared. That's possible. And business innovation for the firm can actually be proxied with the research and development expenses of those firms. So I think a possibility is there for quant data from Orbis. Unlikely to get quant data from surveys for this question because it requires your 30 plus respondents to be knowledgeable, both about pre-war and wartime aspects of business innovation and government leadership. These people are very hard to find. So I don't think it's possible unless you change business innovation to something that is more individual level, because you have respondents. Yeah, business innovation is at the firm level. You will need CEOs at the firm level or someone with really good knowledge of the firm. Is another difficult task. So remove government leadership if you want to do a survey. Adapt business innovation to something like personal investments, and possibly you may be able to get survey data that is quantifiable on this topic. In terms of qual, interviews and focus groups are unlikely because you need at least 3 government leaders. But you can get secondary data. If you look for maybe YouTube interviews of government leaders discussing both business innovation and government leadership and wartime. So these are the drawbacks of such a question. Finally, the last question: what factors shape hobby drone owners' perceptions of public security risks associated with recreational drone use? We have 2 big concepts here. The first that is stated is the PADS concept, public security risks. The second is recreational drone use. Could be also reformulated into the hobby drone owners, which is a customer sort of. Yeah, you can think of this as a marketing slash public admin sort of project. Let's look at some of the issues here. It's not possible to use Orbis data because it's about owners. Orbis data is firm level data. There is a possibility if you change this research question to address firm level issues, not individual level issues. There is an industry 303 in Orbis called manufacture of air and aircraft and related machinery. However, it's imperfect because it brings hobby drones are only a fraction of this industry, and these firms function not just in hobby drones, but spacecraft, other spacecraft and related machinery. But just pointing out that there are some elements in Orbis that are distantly related to some of these research questions, and they may be attractive adjustments to make. I think more likely is to have quantitative type of data obtained through surveys. More likely because it's still, there's a possibility there that this may not turn out in a timely fashion because you need respondents that are drone owners. You need at least 30. So unless you move in a circle of other drone users, it's probably going to be hard to get to 30 plus drone users, drone owners. In terms of qualitative options, I see more possibilities. Generally, in the qual side, there tend to be more possibilities than in the quant side. You can have interviews and focus groups with the drone owners. If you get at least 3, definitely you can have interviews. If you have 6 or more, why not focus groups with these users? You can also use secondary data, meaning look online for publicly available interviews with drone users, videos produced by drone users, content generally delivered by these drone users, hobby drone users, and then ensure you accumulate enough of this qualitative data. Generally, the rule for our restrictions in our model are 4,000 words worth of text data, so transcripts of these secondary sources of qualitative data. So I'll keep it here, leaving time for you to think about how to tailor your own research question to the constraints of this class. Remember, no more than 2 concepts, either 2 management concepts in a context that relates to this year's public administration and defense and security, but it could be another topic. So that data could come from that non-management topic, or it can be one management concept and another concept from the domain of where we want to intersect knowledge of management. So that's the plan. Good luck with your research projects, and do get in touch with me if you'd like more insight on what I presented in this tutorial. Take care.